if you joined us at our campus in earlier Barrie today live, wasn't that incredible what we just heard? Man, the band just took it to a whole other level. And I know what you're thinking. Yeah, go ahead. That's okay. You're probably thinking more music, less preacher, aren't you? That's probably what you're thinking. But the preacher's not going to sit down. So here we are. We're gonna wrap up. We're gonna wrap up part 4 of the Save and Delete series today. So I'm really glad that you joined us. We have been, just to catch you up, for a month now in Psalm 101, just 8 verses, but we spent a whole month in Psalm 101. And that song just set us up beautifully for how we want to wrap up this series. We're talking about the mess that sometimes happens in our lives. And like most of you, I don't want more mess in my life. I want less mess in my life. Maybe you're one of those people who actually got on your knees today and said, God, I want my life to be more messy than it is. I want more bitter relationships. I want more suffering. I want more difficulty in my life. But if you're like me, you probably don't pray that prayer. And here's what we're going to wrap up the series with. And it's quite simple to understand, but sometimes it can get confusing to do. So what we want to talk about today is simply this. If you want less mess in your life, delete what's bad and save what's best. It even kind of rhymes in a really cheesy way. Have you noticed that? If you want less mess, delete what's bad and save what's best. Now, that seems, on the one hand, it's almost insulting, isn't it? It's like, well, of course I'm going to delete the bad things in my life and I'm going to save what's best in my life. But the challenge is, sometimes I have a hard time really reminding myself of what's bad and what's best. And other times, urgency, because life can get very urgent, just sort of by gravitational pull, makes us or leads us to delete the very best things in life. And so sometimes we don't really know what's bad and we don't really know what's best. And we started talking about that last week, in particular with part 3 of this series, when we talked about toxic people. You can catch up online or you can get the iTunes podcast, for free. Just a really important teaching that we pulled right out of Psalm 101 about what do you do when there are toxic people in your life. Sometimes you don't really know and you don't know which ones to delete and which ones to save. And really, Psalm 101 can kind of be summed up as just a series of things that King David, because he wrote the psalm, decided to save, and influences he decided to delete in his life. Now, David wrote this at a very pivotal moment. He had spent about almost 15 years as a king in waiting. When he was a teenager, there was a prophet named Samuel who came up to him, and Samuel said, here's what you're going to do. You're going to become king, but the problem is there's a king on the throne right now, and you're not going to become king until he dies. And sure enough, 15 years later, Saul died, and David was ready to become king of an entire nation. I think I have trouble leading what I'm leading or leading a family, or you feel like that. Could you imagine being responsible for leading an entire nation? Well, that's what David was responsible for. And so he, in Psalm 101, tries to set the framework for how he's going to lead as the king of a nation. And he says it really boils down to this. There are certain things that I need to make sure I delete in my life and certain things that I need to save. And so Psalm 101 is basically just a series of things we save and a series of things to delete. And the practical value of following it is simply this. That if you want less mess, delete what's bad and save what's best. Now, some of you probably, if you've been into this series already, you're saying, okay, I get that. And some of you are here and you're not convinced about the Jesus part. You're not convinced about Christianity. In fact, some of you are probably saying, I agree with this. And in some respects, even more than Christians I know, I'm kind of living it out. I'm saving the good influences. I'm deleting the bad influences. In fact, I think I'm a decent person. I think I'm quite a good person. So why do I really need God in the midst of it? You might actually read the entire psalm or other passages of scripture, and you might say, here's what I believe. I believe I'm already on that path. I don't think Christianity can teach me anything. I hear that argument all the time. And if that's you, I would just say this. If you already agree with Psalm 101 and you think that's a great way to live, but you're really not sure what role God would play in your life, why don't you get to know this God that you already agree with? If he actually writes such good material, if he actually brings about precepts that are a great way to live, why wouldn't you want to get to know the God who designed it all that way? See, I think that's a very compelling argument. The second thing I believe is there are going to be influences I need to delete that I really don't have the power to delete. And there are going to be influences that I need to save that I don't think I really have the power to save. So why not turn to God, who can help us in our weakness decide what influences to save and what influences to delete. So that's really where we're at. And the whole series is based on this sort of big idea that the influences around us shape the character within us. In the same way that your body responds to things that are healthy and things that are maybe not so healthy for you, David says the same thing's true of life. If you really want to know how to lead a better life, and if you really want less mess, what you need to do is you need to make good choices. And there are good choices, and there are choices that won't kill you in an instant, but they're just not necessarily all that great for you. And so Psalm 101 really walks us through that. So what we're going to do today is back cleanup. We're going to review the whole psalm at the end. And in the meantime, we're going to look at the verses that we haven't looked at so far. So if you have your Bibles, open them to Psalm 101. Psalm 101, we're going to start reading at the first verse. And David does something really interesting. And I don't know how you read the Bible, but when I read the Bible, I am so tempted to skip over verses, like the verse that opens up Psalm 101, because it doesn't really sound, I'm so practical, I'm so tangible. I like to get to stuff that's kind of meaty, and I look at this and I go, I understand why that's there, but why would he start such a practical psalm with such an impractical thing? And look at what this verse has to say, Psalm 101, verse 1. I will sing of your love and justice, Lord. I will praise you with songs. Now, David, you need to understand, not only was a king and a leader, he was also a musician. He played the harp and he wrote songs. In fact, the book of Psalms is really just a collection of songs that were written in large measure by David and a few other leaders, and he loved to worship God. Now, David, I think, sets this up as one of the things that you and I need to save in our lives. One of the most important things that we can do in our lives is to save the good influence. And David starts the whole psalm by saying, here's something I'm going to save. Even though I'm becoming king, even though I'm not really a shepherd boy and I got all this time to kill in the fields, I mean, what do you really do? You just got these sheep, so you get your harp and you write songs. Even though I'm moving into a different season of life that's going to get really busy, the first influence I'm going to save is my relationship with God. You see, I think some of the tension in trying to decide what you're going to save and what you're going to delete is that we often delete the things we're supposed to save, and we save the things we're supposed to delete. We save the things because they're easy and convenient that are not good for us, and we delete the things that are good for us just because we don't really have time for them. Now, I don't know what your personal practice is, but I know a lot of us probably want to have some kind of personal, meaningful time with God. Sometimes in Christian circles, we call that our devotional life, our quiet time, our devotion time. I don't know what you call it. That's something that I've tried to establish, not just as a leader, but also as a Christian, as a priority in my life. And here's the way I do it, just because I'm a morning person. I try to set aside somewhere between 15 minutes to an hour at the beginning of every day to spend time reading the Bible and praying. That's what I try to do. Some of you, you're night hawks. You can do like midnight and you do your devotions before you go to bed. Man, at 8 o'clock, I'm just waiting until 10 o'clock so I can go to bed. That's sort of where I am on that whole spectrum. I know we're all different that way. It might be lunchtime for you, but for me, I love doing it in the morning because it's the best time I have in the day. And secondly, I think it kind of sets up my day. Now, the challenge for me, in the same way that I'm sure it's a challenge for you, is there are lots of things that compete with my time with God. Even at 5:15 or 6 o'clock in the morning, there are things that compete with it. First of all, there's just the pressure of everyday life. I'm a little bit ADD, that way. And so I'm always thinking about, I wonder what time the sun is going to rise this morning. Urgent things like that distract my attention from God or from praying. I'll think, I wonder when the rest of the family is going to get up. What am I going to eat for breakfast? Do we have enough yogurt? Do we not have enough yogurt? You get distracted and you can easily delete your time with God. Another thing that happens is you have a really, really pressing project on the go. One of the temptations I still struggle with is to sacrifice that time in the morning because I got a really important meeting later in the day, or I'm not quite done my project list at the level it's got to get done. So it's easy to cut what you should be saving and to add things that over time really aren't going to amount to much. Because guess what? There's always going to be another project. There's always going to be something else to do. It's tempting to get more sleep. It's tempting just to say, I got more important, more urgent, more pressing things to do. My relationship with God can wait. And if you're trying to establish a relationship with God, if you're trying to build a personal relationship with God, one of the most important things you could do is spend regular time with God, and it will be one of the things that you are most tempted to cut. I know we faced a period sort of in our family life where my wife, Tony, and I, always had this practice of having a date night. We always tried to establish a date night. There'd be one night a week when our kids were younger where we'd hire a babysitter or make other arrangements, and we'd try to go out. And I don't know about you. Some of you are in this phase right now. Our kids are a little bit older. They're 20 and 16. But man, when our kids were between 8 and 14, it always seemed to me like that was just the busiest phase of life. And here's what happened. You get up first thing in the morning, maybe you have your quiet time with God, maybe you don't, and you're just running all day long. You fall down dead in bed at the end of the day. You get up the next day and you do it all over again. It's just a really busy phase in life. And we would always try to carve out some date time. But what was happening is because we spent so little time together during the week, other than just trying to get the kids off and do this, is when it came to date night, we might be going to a really nice restaurant or we might be going out for a special night, but it would start to get funky because we'd talk about all the things that we didn't talk about during the week, and then you end up there's a little bit of friction, there's a little bit of argument here and there, and I would think, man, I don't want to drop like $50 on dinner. I want to go to Burger King, right? This is like a $7 date, not a $50 date. If we're just going to disagree anyway, right? Why spend the money? And so we got in this place where our date nights were not a lot of fun anymore. And it took us a while to figure out, but it's like, well, I know what the problem is. We just don't spend enough time together every day. And even if it's just 10 minutes, if you can sort of deal with problems as they arise and deal with situations as they arrive, then the time that you want to spend meaningfully together goes better. And I wonder if that's a little bit the same as our relationship with God. For some of you, you don't really know what you'd pray about every day if you actually prayed every day. And in fact, when you do pray, it's usually a complaint session. It's like, God, this isn't going right. This isn't going well. Can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And God, you show up on God's caller ID and he's like, oh, here it comes again, right? That's what it feels like for you. And ironically, that's exactly how David started Psalm 101. We'll see in a few minutes. It's a cry for help. It's a cry for help. It's like, God, help me. I'm about to become king. I don't know how to become king. I've never been king before. I've never been entrusted with this much responsibility before, and I need your help. Can you help me? Can you help me? But then he goes through this whole series of things you save, things you delete. One of the things you need to save if you want less mess in your life is what David saved. His personal time with God. And as a leader, even if you lead worship or even if you lead your preacher, that sort of thing, I think it's so important for me to keep my worship life up, to keep my prayer life up, to make sure I read the Bible, not just what I'm preaching about on Sunday, but read the Bible just because I'm a follower of Jesus. That's what I do. And the best discipline you could do, and it'll look a little bit different for you than it looks for me, whether that's in the morning or at night or what you read or how you pray or whatever, but I just think that's one of the most important things you can save. And if you save your personal time with God, I believe you're going to have less mess in your life. I think your time with God will be richer. I think your relationships will get better. I think you're going to be moving through issues that maybe you don't have enough time to reflect on in the craziness of life. But if you spend that time with God, he's going to start to chip away at your character. And he's going to make you a different person. And I believe you're going to be better for it. You'll have less mess in your life if you save your time with God. So that was something that David was really, really committed to saving. Verse 2. I love how he phrases this. He says, I will be careful to live a blameless life. When will you come to help me? That's the second part of the verse. I will be careful to live a blameless life. When will you come to help me? So again, and we're going to be doing a series on prayer coming up next. But man, I'll tell you, I love that because David's like, help. And usually we finish the prayer there, but he's like, okay, there are things you need to do, God, but there are things I can do. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a commitment as a leader and as a man to live, as far as it depends on me, a blameless life. Now, one of the significant things David did here, and one of the things he saves in this psalm, is his level of personal responsibility. He says, I will live a blameless life. Now, that's a really important thing to save when you're thinking about the things to save in your life, because here's what I'm tempted to do. I'm tempted to think this. I wish he would lead a blameless life. I wish she would lead. You know that boss at work? Oh my goodness. I wish they would lead a blameless life. I am so tempted in every relationship to wish other people would do things. David doesn't start with that. He says, here's how I'm going to start this. As far as it depends on me, I am going to lead a blameless life. I'm going to do that. I want you to think about it. If you could take some responsibility for your conduct and your action, how would your life be different? If you started to say, okay, I know, she might always be that way, or he might always do that, or they might always be this way, but as far as it depends on me, as far as my personal responsibility goes, I want to live a blameless life. God, I need your help. David goes, that's one thing I got to save, because here's the reality, okay? King of Syria, I'm not so sure. I might be king of Israel. If he's king of Syria, I'm not sure the king of Syria is going to lead a blameless life. The king of the Philistines, oh my goodness, they're Philistines. What do you expect, okay? They are not going to live a blameless life. But me, I'm the king of a nation. I need to lead a blameless life. So he takes personal responsibility. That's one of the things I need to save in my life. That's one of the things you need to save in your life, is you need to save a sense of personal responsibility. And how would your world be different if you stopped worrying about whether other people would get better and you just decided that you yourself were going to get better? What would be different in your marriage? What would be different in your family? What would be different at work if you just stopped worrying about and fixating on other people and you decided, look, as far as it depends on me, I'm going to lead a blameless life. And then he continues that thought. He says, God, I'm going to need your help for that. But then he says, next part of the verse, I will lead a life of integrity in my own home. I will lead a life of integrity in my own home. Of all the influences I need to save, here's what I need to save. I need to save a life of integrity. Now, home's an interesting place to choose it, because the reality of home is when God puts like 4 or 5 people into the same square footage over a lifetime, you learn where each other's buttons are. Isn't that true? You discover that. And if there's any place where it's easiest to be yourself, but it's also the most difficult to really get along, it can often be at home. That's difficult. That's difficult. It's tough to live a life of integrity in your own home, because that's where you just kind of want to relax. That's where you just kind of want to be yourself. And the problem is you discover things about yourself on the inside that you didn't know were there, that don't really come out in other aspects of your life. But when you get home, you kind of discover that, and you kind of bump up against each other, and it's, oh man. And David says, here's what I need to do. I need to live a life of integrity in my own home. Well, what does that look like? See, there's this thing that happens in a lot of families, and I don't really know what to call it. I started noticing it a few years ago, and I suffer from it, and my guess is you probably suffer from it as well. And it doesn't really have a name, so I kind of made up a name for it. I simply call it family voice. And almost everybody in a family has one. It's the voice that you only use for the people in your family. And it's a combination. You know where this is going, don't you? Okay. It's a combination of irritation and frustration and aggravation and a lack of patience. And I can't even imitate it particularly well, but you ask your teenagers, they'll be able to tell you what your family voice is really like. And once in a while, if you're in a mall or something like that, you'll hear a family that's talking civilly, and then family voice will break out. You kind of look at them. It's like, ugh, really? That's how you treat each other? But I've got a family voice. Chances are you have a family voice. And as I thought about it, it's like, how do you avoid family voice? How do you do that? Because it's a sign that you're probably not really living with integrity in your own home. And why is it that we, treat our family that way? You know what I think we ought to do? We ought to treat our family like they are perfect strangers. Why? Because we treat perfect strangers with more respect than often we do with our family. You think about it. When you're meeting a stranger, it's kind of like, oh, hello, how are you? So imagine at your home, oh, I see the dishwasher wasn't emptied. Oh, why don't I go empty the dishwasher? I'll just do that. Oh, no, I can help. No, I can help. You see, you get into that space. If you start treating the people you live with like they were strangers, you'll probably get along a whole lot better, and you'll solve the problem of family voice. See, David understood that, and he said, I need to live a life of integrity in my own home. Now, do I succeed at that as a husband and a father? The answer is certainly not every day. I make mistakes. There's something about family that brings out the best in us, and it brings out the worst in us. And you can see that. If you follow David's life, he made some disastrous mistakes in his own home. He made a terrible mistake about marriage. He made some bad decisions about becoming a dad. His parenting style, not that great. Bible actually talks about it. But he says, God, I'm about to become the king of Israel, and here's what I need to do. I need to learn to live a life of integrity in my own home. You know what I think that boils down to? I think it boils down to this. Your family needs to see that you're trying. Because you know what? We all know families, and maybe this is the family you grew up in, and maybe this is your story. I don't know whether it's your story. But you kind of realize when your dad turned 35, he just quit trying. He knew he wasn't living a life of integrity, but he stopped caring about it. He was closed to input. He wasn't open to it. He didn't want to hear what you had to say. He just stopped trying. And when you stop trying, you stop living a life of integrity. You know how you know you're still trying? When is the last time your family heard you apologize to them? That probably means you're still trying. If you own your mistakes, if you say, you know what, I'm sorry, I really blew that, that probably means you're still trying. If you're like open to input and you're maybe even sit down with a counselor at some point, it's like, I got to solve this thing, that means you're still trying. And I don't know whether you ever arrive as far as integrity happens, but here's what I can't allow myself to do. I can't allow myself, no matter how old I am, to stop trying. I need to learn to become a better husband and a better dad. And if your kids are grown, they're still watching you. You can get better at what you do. And if you're open to input, remember we looked at that last week in Toxic People. If you're a wise person, you are open to input. The fool shuts it down and says, I got it all figured out. Leave me alone. I'm not open. I'm not learning. They don't change over time. Wise people do. Wise people don't necessarily have it all together. But you just don't want to stop trying. And you should keep trying on your 75th birthday. And you should keep trying until the last day you draw breath. And if you do that, there's a good chance that you'll be living with integrity in your own home. So David says that's one influence you absolutely want to save. And then he talks about relationships. And we dealt with this in some great detail last weekend. We talked about toxic people, wise people, foolish people, and evil people. He says this, Psalm 101, verse 6. I will search for faithful people to be my companions. I just want to search for faithful people. And last week we saw there are people who are always around you. You always got lots of people, but some of them are not really good for you. And while you might influence them, you shouldn't really allow them to influence you. That really the people you want around you who influence you are the people who are healthy, the people who are good for you, the people who help you grow. And that doesn't mean that there's not a role for other people. It just means that you don't want to have them in your inner circle where you're really looking for input. And if you've got a lot of mess in your life, there's a very good chance that you got that confused. And you got people around you and they're speaking into your life and you're going, my life isn't getting any better, it's getting worse. And it's probably getting worse because you got the wrong people in your inner circle. And you're like, how come I just can't make progress? It's because you need less of this and you need more of this. And David said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to save these influences. When I find a wise person, when I find somebody who's good, when I find somebody who's healthy, I'm going to try to save that. I'm going to try to build relationships with those kinds of people, not end relationships with those kind of people. And when you find them, hang on. I was reminded of the importance of this a couple weeks ago, and I was just having one of those days. You know, you have one of those days where there's nothing really wrong. It's just maybe you're wrong or something inside you is wrong, and there wasn't really anything that had changed, but I was just frustrated, and I was kind of exasperated, and I had some time set aside with this friend. And in the morning, as I was getting ready for that call, and he doesn't even live in one of our cities, he lives far away, but I wanted to have a conversation with him because I was just frustrated. And I don't know, if you get frustrated, so this is what I do sometimes, and I'm not resigning, just so you know, but you create like, what would I do with my life? And here's what I want to do with my life. I wanted to go work in a warehouse somewhere where I could stack boxes. That's what I wanted to do. That's my fantasy job. When I have a bad day, it's like, I just want to move a box, and then you move it, and it stays moved. That's my goal. Then I'll move another one and it stays moved. Because in ministry, stuff doesn't stay moved. It's just like, okay, I thought I fixed that. I didn't fix it. It's unfixed again. And I was frustrated that day. And I had a conversation with him, and he just kind of listened. But he's one of these people, and he had a few wise words of advice. And mostly he just listened. And at the end of it, I just felt like this weight had been lifted off my shoulder. And I sat back and I thought, wow, I am so grateful that I've got people like that in my life. And what I've learned over time is that you can't really do this alone. You need people like that in your inner circle. You need people like that who just give you life, who don't take it away from you. And when you find people like that, nourish those relationships. Nourish them. All I needed that day was somebody to talk to. Nothing changed when I hung up the phone, but I felt so much better about everything. You just need people like that. How do you find them, though? Well, you're in a good place. You're at church. You see, in the same way that we are tempted to delete our quiet time with God, one of the things that probably you're tempted to do and I'm tempted to do is you're tempted to delete community. See, and we talk about this in ministry quite a bit these days, but things are shifting so quickly with the move to life online. So much of our experience at our church is reproducible. For example, if you miss a weekend service, you can get the podcast. You can get it in HD. You can get it for free. If you can't get it online, you can get it on iTunes. You can get it just about anywhere. So much of our experience is reproducible. There are churches now where they broadcast the whole thing online. You don't even have to get out of bed to go to church. And it's like, well, what does that really do? And is that good or is that not good? It's just the world we live in. But one of the things that we've landed on as a community that we realize is there's one thing you can't podcast. You can't podcast relationships. And as much as we're all for sharing the message and getting it out there and sharing it with your friends, there is something you can't get on the online world, and that is people around you who actually know you, and they know who you are, and they know what you're like, and who can walk through this life with you. So you can always catch the podcast if you miss a Sunday. But so many of you show up and you serve, and serving is one of the best ways to really get in relationship with people. And you realize, man, I've made some friends. I know we're setting up stage panels, or we're serving in Wambaland, or we're doing student ministry together. But now I realize, as a result of serving together over a few years, I've got a handful of extra people in my life who are incredible people. And I need more influence like that in my life. Another way we do it, this week, hundreds of people will gather in community group. And they're going to do it in their own homes, 12 or fewer people, and they'll get together to pray together and connect together, and often they study what we talked about on the weekend, and they try to apply it in their lives. We are big fans of community group. Because, you're going to have people at every stage of life and in every category in your community group. But over time, you go to 2 or 3 group links and you get in community group, here's what you're going to discover. That after 3, 4, 5 years, you've now got a handful of people who are around you, who are influencing you, who are great people to track with. And you're going to look back and you're going to say, man, I need to save those influences. I need to be around people like that more. And if you're wondering, how do I get less of this in my life and how do I get more of that? Getting involved in the local church is one of the best ways you can do it. And one of the best ways to actually meet people is to serve together and to be in community together. And if you're not serving or you're not in community group, just sign up. Sign up to serve. Sign up for the next group link when it comes along and get involved. And it won't happen right away. But over time, give yourself 2 or 3 years. You're going to be in a place where you say, wow, I got more of this and less of this in my life. And if you want less mess, you got to save that. Those are the influences you need to save. Last verse we're going to look at today. David says, only those who are above reproach will be allowed to serve me. I got to not only find wise and faithful companions, I need to find people on my inner court. I need to find people to serve in this government who are above reproach. And when you find them, that doesn't mean they're perfect, but it means that they are trying, that they are always getting better. If you heard last week's message, they are wise, they're growing, they're open to input. They're open to influences. And as much as you might resist this in your life and go, yeah, you know what, it's fine, I'll just mix it up a little bit more. Truth is, you want to be led by people who are above reproach. You want your city to be governed, your province to be governed, your country to be governed, the globe to be governed by people who are above reproach. You want to be part of a company, if you work, where the leaders are above reproach. You do. You don't want to be in an organization with messed up leaders who can't set boundaries. You want people who don't lie, who don't cheat, who don't steal. You want that in the education system. You want that in every aspect of your life. And David says, I realize that. And those are influences. When I find people who are above reproach, I need to invite them to serve. And I need to serve with them. You see, if you want less mess in your life, you need to delete the bad influences and you need to save what's best. Now, if you're attending our campuses today, on your way in, you got a little card like this. And all it is the whole psalm in order. We've been chopping it up and looking at it systematically and subject-wise for the last month, but here it is, all in order. And I don't know what you want to do with it. Maybe you want to, put it in your Bible, tuck it in there, but I hope it serves a reference point. Stick it up on a mirror, put it in the glove box of your car, something like that. But I hope you can come back to this over time and you could look at it. And as you seek to grow as a person, as you seek to say, God, you brought me into this moment in my life. And some of you, you're hearing this as a teenager. Some of you are ready to start a brand new segment of your life. This is great, great, great advice as to how to make sure you don't get less mess that you need to delete. And you have more of the influences you need to save. And you save what's important, not just what's urgent and demanding. And I just want to read through the psalm with you together. So if you have it, we're just going to read it from start to finish. You can read along. David starts by saying, here's something I'm going to save. I will sing of your love and justice, Lord. I will praise you with songs. I'm going to save worship. I'm going to save my relationship with God. Then he says, I will be careful to live a blameless life. When will you come to help me? I need your help to do this, but I'm going to take responsibility for everything I can see. Then he says, I will lead a life of integrity in my own home. Starts behind closed doors. I will refuse toxic things. I will refuse to look at anything vile and vulgar. I'm going to delete that. I hate all who deal crookedly, and I will have nothing to do with them. I'm going to delete toxic people. I will reject perverse ideas and stay away from every evil. Delete. I will not tolerate people who slander their neighbors. I will not endure conceit and pride. Delete. I will search, save, for faithful people to be my companions. Only those who are above reproach will be allowed to serve me. To save those influences. I will not allow deceivers to serve in my house, and liars will not stay in my presence. My daily task will be to ferret out the wicked and free the city of the Lord from their grip. It's no surprise to me that when the scripture has to sum up David's life, even though he made a lot of mistakes, it says this about him, that he was a man after God's own heart. And I don't know how you want to live your life, but man, if I die and somebody said that about me, I would be so grateful. That he didn't get it all right, and he made a lot of mistakes. He made a ton, but he was a man after God's own heart. And David, and this is what's so incredible and what got us started in this series, David gives us the blueprint. He's like, if you want to be a person of integrity, here's how to do it. And it's not the whole thing, but my goodness, this could get you started. Here are the influences you need to delete. Here are the influences you need to save. And if you want less mess, because there's lots of messy governments and there's lots of messy leaders and there's lots of messy churches and there's lots of messy things. But if you want less mess, you need to delete what's bad and save what's best. And I just want you to imagine, because you're not going to turn this ship, and I can't turn this ship in a day, but I want you to imagine what would happen if you just came back to this every once in a while over the next 3 years, and you started to see this as a filter for your world. And when people came into your life, you began to say, okay, are they wise? Are they foolish? Are they good influences? Because I know the influences around me are going to shape the character within me. I know that. Are they going to go into the circle that influence me? Or are they going to be people I influence? Or are they just evil and I need to delete them? And you're going to start to ask, is this something vile or vulgar? Should I really watch that? Is that building me up or is it tearing me down? What do I see inside me? What are the characteristics inside me that I should be deleting and I need God's help to delete? And what are the influences that I need to save? Because if you save the right things and you delete the right things, you will be a different kind of person. And you'll be a different kind of husband or a different kind of wife. You'll be a different kind of father or a different kind of mother. You'll be a different kind of employee. You'll be a different kind of friend. You'll be a different kind of neighbor because you will be a different kind of person. And if you want less mess in your life, you need to delete what's bad and save what's best. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, I'm really, really grateful. As tough as this teaching is and as surprising as it is because it's so clear, I just want to thank you for the Psalms and thank you for Psalm 101. Just thank you for what you're teaching us. Thank you for what we've heard, and now give us the wisdom to apply it. Lord, sometimes it's so difficult to figure out what are the influences we need to delete and what are the influences we need to save. I pray you would help us to see that with clarity. As we try to apply this psalm to our life, God, will you give us insight and wisdom into all of that? And I just pray for those of us who are having to make difficult decisions this week. And we really do need your help. And I pray you would come along and help us. As tough as deleting the toxic things and sometimes even the toxic people can be, will you help us? And for those of us, God, who are maybe at a point where we're kind of already doing this and our lives are better for it, help us to see that you are the author of all good. And help us to deepen and build our relationship with you. Because of advice like David gives in Psalm 101 is that good. We just want to get to know the God who designs and creates all of that. And so we surrender this and our lives to you. In Jesus' name, amen.